There is a pecking order for international arrivals or visitors based on the pandemic status quo from whence they came. PTV correspondent Naomi Tiburcio gives us an update on the color-coded classification of nations pertaining to their pandemic status and order of entry into the country in this report.
The IATF released the latest list of red, yellow, and green listed countries and territories effective tomorrow, the 16th, until the 31st of October. The only country added to the red list is Romania. Passengers who've been in Romania for the last 14 days since their expected arrival in the Philippines will not be allowed to enter the country except if they are repatriated Filipinos. Filipinos hailing from a red list country will be subject to the highest quarantine, a 10-day facility-based quarantine, an RT-PCR test on the 7th day, and completing the rest of their 14-day quarantine in their homes. Meanwhile, more countries and territories have been added to the green list. Passengers coming from these areas enjoy the most lenient quarantine protocols. They include China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. Fully vaccinated individuals from green list areas will not be required to undergo facility-based quarantine, but only a 14-day self-monitoring, so long as they receive a negative RT-PCR test result 72 hours prior to their departures. Meanwhile, unvaccinated, partially vaccinated, and those who failed to get their RT-PCR tests before arrival will need to undergo a 5-day facility-based quarantine and get a negative RT-PCR test result. On the other hand, the remaining areas not mentioned are part of the yellow list. This includes the U.S. Fully vaccinated passengers coming from yellow list countries and territories will be required to go under a 10-day quarantine, with the first few days spent in isolation facilities. An RT-PCR test will be taken on the 5th day, and those who receive a negative RT-PCR test result will be allowed to quarantine at home. Unvaccinated and partially vaccinated passengers, meanwhile, need to complete 14 days of quarantine. The first few days will be spent in a facility, an RT-PCR test to be taken on the 7th day, and the rest of the quarantine period will be spent at home in case their results turn negative. These are the documents recognized in the Philippines as proof of vaccination. However, Filipinos overseas are hoping the IATF will reconsider the quarantine period, especially for yellow list countries. This includes Gilbert from California, who hasn't returned to the country since before the pandemic began.
Kung may quarantine pa rin by next year, hindi worth it, hindi na namin itutuloy. For me, I want to go home. They should make it less for vaccinated people.
Philippine Ambassador to the United States Jose Manuel Romualdez is hoping the IATF will consider adding the U.S. to the green list countries.
I really would like to urge our friends in the IATF to consider the United States. As I said, a large majority of Filipino Americans are fully vaccinated. I know that for a fact because I just had a forum with the Filipino American Nurses Association the other day, and they were telling me on how eager many of the Filipinos are in getting their vaccines. So I'm confident that those that are going to be going home this Christmas definitely are fully vaccinated.
IATF says their data analytics group will give advice on the matter. Naomi Tiburcio for The Nation.